I stared out the floor-to-ceiling window of my penthouse apartment, the city lights shimmering like scattered diamonds below. My hands, resting on the smooth glass, felt almost foreign to me tonight, steady, confident, yet trembling with memories I couldn't quite shake. The soft silk of my blouse grazed my skin, a reminder of the life I had fought tooth and nail to build. My phone buzzed sharply on the marble countertop, breaking my reverie. I glanced down. It was her, my mother-in-law, the same woman who had once sneered at my children, dismissing their accomplishments as trivial, insisting they were not worth celebrating. Her name flashed on the screen, a jolt of unease twisting in my stomach. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her remain in her bubble of judgment. But another part, stronger, sharper, curled with anticipation. Tonight, things were different. I had changed. My life had changed. I remembered the sting of her words, the bitter taste of her disbelief. And now I had the chance to show her what she never saw, what she never valued. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren below. I could smell the faint aroma of roasted coffee still lingering from my morning ritual. My heart beat with a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, I pressed answer, and let my voice, calm but laced with controlled intensity, meet hers on the line. I closed my eyes and let the memory wash over me like a sudden, unwelcome storm. Years ago, I was a younger version of myself, naive, eager to please, desperate for acceptance. I had dressed the kids in their best outfits, spent hours baking cupcakes, and meticulously planned a small celebration for their achievements. I thought family would be there to cheer, to smile, to feel proud. But the moment we stepped through the door, her sharp eyes, my mother-in-law's, swept over us like a cold gust of wind. "Why bother celebrating them?" she had said, her voice dripping with scorn. "They're not worth the fuss. None of them have the talent or drive to amount to anything." I felt my chest tighten, my throat closing as my hands shook, gripping the edges of the table to keep myself from falling apart. My children's smiles faltered, their small hands clutching mine for reassurance. I wanted to shout, to defend them, to make her see the light in their eyes, but the words stuck, tangled and heavy on my tongue. That night, in the quiet of my small apartment, I sat on the worn couch, tears staining my shirt. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, the words she had whispered when I was still a teenager. "Never let anyone tell you what you're worth. Your value is in the love you give and the dreams you chase. Protect that always." I pulled out the small, delicate necklace she had given me years before, a charm shaped like a rising sun. I traced its outline with my finger, letting its weight anchor me. That simple gift, her unwavering belief in me, became my silent vow. I would prove them all wrong, not through confrontation, not through anger, but by building a life so undeniable, so real, that no one could dismiss it again. By the time I went to bed that night, I had made a decision. I would no longer bend to their judgment, their ridicule, or their dismissive glances. I would work quietly, fiercely, and relentlessly. And one day, they would see the truth, and my children would know their worth without anyone else having to validate it. I remember the first morning I woke up and felt the weight of possibility pressing against my chest. The apartment was small, humble, cluttered with half-read books and hand-me-down furniture, but it was mine. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the tiny kitchen, and let my mind wander to what could be. My grandmother's necklace rested against my collarbone, warm from my skin, a constant reminder that I wasn't alone in my journey. I had no choice but to start somewhere, small steps, quiet determination. I began taking online courses, staying awake long after the kids were in bed, learning skills that once seemed intimidating. Marketing, finance, negotiation. I absorbed it all like a sponge, refusing to let the self-doubt creep in. Then came a mentor, a seasoned woman in the corporate world, who saw something in me that I had barely begun to recognize in myself. "You've got the instincts," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "Now learn the discipline." "You're capable of more than you think." Her office smelled faintly of jasmine and old books, a smell I would come to associate with possibility and patience. The journey was far from easy. I stumbled, missed deadlines, questioned every decision, and faced judgment from people who assumed my quiet presence meant incompetence. Nights blurred into early mornings as I balanced the kids, the work, and the gnawing sense of proving myself. But every small victory, the first client who trusted me, the first project that turned a profit, the first compliment from someone I respected, was a brick in the foundation I was building. I kept my successes hidden, posting modest updates on social media, while the reality of my life remained private. I didn't need applause, I needed results. Each time my mother-in-law's words echoed in my mind, I reminded myself, this was not about revenge. This was about proving, to myself and my children, that our worth could never be dictated by others. Months turned into years, and the empire I quietly built began to take shape. The kids watched me, sometimes unaware of the sacrifices I made, but I could see their admiration in fleeting glances, in whispered comments. They began to understand the value of perseverance, of independence, of quiet resilience. I had transformed our lives, not with confrontation, but with steadfast dedication, and every small win fueled the fire that would one day become undeniable. Even now, looking back, I can feel the tension of those early days, the fear, the exhilaration, the determination, but I also feel pride. Pride in myself, in my children, and in the life we were quietly crafting, far from the judgmental eyes of anyone who had doubted us. The day they arrived, I could feel the tension in the air like a thick fog. My mother-in-law had insisted on dropping by to see how things were going, her voice laced with that same superiority I had endured for years. I let them in, greeting them with a calm smile, the kind that carried neither fear nor resentment, only poised confidence. As they stepped into my living room, their eyes widened, taking in the space around them. The walls were adorned with art I had carefully chosen over the years, paintings from local artists, photographs of travels and milestones. A sleek desk in the corner held awards I had quietly earned, and the soft hum of modern lighting highlighted the elegance of the apartment. Everything screamed of success, refinement, and quiet power. They didn't say a word. My mother-in-law's lips pressed into a thin line, her hands clenching involuntarily. My father-in-law's eyebrows lifted as he scanned the room, and my husband's eyes darted between us, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his usually confident face. I let the silence stretch, letting them absorb the reality I had built from the ground up. Finally, I spoke. My voice was steady, warm, and yet edged with the authority of someone who had fought for every inch of her life. "You want to see how we were doing?" I said, gesturing toward my children who now stood beside me, radiating confidence and pride. "This is the life we've built. Not because of anyone's approval, but because we refuse to let anyone define our worth." I watched as the words sank in, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief. "I manage my own business," I continued, allowing the weight of my accomplishments to fill the room. "I've created opportunities, earned recognition, and secured a future my children and I deserve. And yes," I added, looking directly at her, "your previous dismissals and harsh words didn't stop us. They fueled us." Her reaction was instantaneous, a sharp intake of breath, her hand flying to her mouth. My father-in-law's jaw slackened, a faint look of shame crossing his features. Even my husband, who had quietly supported me behind the scenes, looked at me with renewed admiration, perhaps realizing the depth of what I had achieved in silence. I let my children shine, allowing them to recount small victories, awards, and milestones I had nurtured quietly. The pride in their voices was unmistakable, and I could see the sting of realization in my mother-in-law's eyes. For the first time, she couldn't dismiss them. She couldn't diminish their worth. And that was the moment I understood the true power of our journey, the power of resilience, of quiet determination, and of standing tall without bending to judgment. I hadn't just built a life, I had created a reality that no one could undermine, and the shock in her eyes was simply the reflection of what she had refused to see all along. With the initial shock settling into the room like a quiet storm, I felt the unmistakable shift. The balance of power had changed. For years, they had held the authority, the judgment, the assumptions, the condescending smiles, but now it was mine. And I intended to use it wisely, firmly, and with clarity. I leaned against the polished edge of my desk. The smooth would cool beneath my fingertips, and met my mother-in-law's gaze. "If any of us are going to move forward," I began, my voice calm but resolute, "it needs to be on different terms. Respect, honesty, and recognition of everyone's efforts, not just what you choose to see." I outlined the conditions carefully, each tied to personal growth and healing. "You will acknowledge my children's achievements without judgment or belittling remarks. You will attend events and milestones without criticism. And most importantly," I added, my tone softening slightly, "you will let go of the past grudges that have poisoned our family for years." Turning to my father-in-law, I added, "You'll need to set an example. Support them openly, and recognize the hard work that went into building this life. No more dismissive comments, no more passive skepticism." His head nodded slowly, the weight of understanding settling on his shoulders. I looked at my children, who had been watching silently. "And for you," I said, directing my words to them, "we keep striving. We keep learning. We continue to honor the work and love that went into getting us here." Their smiles were tentative at first, then blossomed into pride and confidence. Finally, I addressed my husband. "You've supported me quietly, but now it's time for visible partnership. We're equals in this life we've built, and that means standing together against negativity, together in celebration, and together in growth." I could see the mixture of relief, guilt, and respect in their eyes. This wasn't punishment, it was an invitation to rise, to change, to finally align with the values I had held onto for so long. I wasn't bitter, I was strong. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was offering a path to healing that could only succeed if they embraced it fully. The room felt lighter, the tension easing into something fragile yet promising. My voice, calm and composed, carried the weight of experience and authority, showing that compassion and firmness could coexist. They would have to adapt, or continue living in the shadow of my children's worth, undeniable and radiant, regardless of their approval. For the first time in years, I felt complete control, not over them, but over the space between us, over the future of my family, and over the respect that had been denied to us for far too long. And that realization was exhilarating, grounding, and quietly, undeniably satisfying. Weeks passed and subtle changes began to take root. My mother-in-law no longer offered dismissive glances at school performances or children's awards. She lingered at recitals, clapped a little louder, and occasionally whispered words of encouragement, hesitant but genuine. My father-in-law made small, deliberate efforts to praise achievements he would have ignored before. The tension that had clung to family gatherings like an unwelcome guest was slowly dissipating. I watched it all quietly, sipping my evening tea, feeling a profound sense of peace. My children laughed freely, their confidence radiating from every gesture. They were learning, as I had, that validation comes from within, and while acceptance from others was a gift, it was never a necessity. I held the small rising sun necklace in my hand, tracing its edges with a finger and smiling. That simple token of belief from my grandmother had carried me through years of doubt, through long nights of hard work, through every pang of hurt. Now, it rested lightly against my skin again, a reminder that strength, perseverance, and love had carried us here. Sitting in the soft glow of the evening light, I reflected on the journey. Every moment of pain, every sleepless night, every judgmental word that once cut so deep had shaped me into a woman who knew her worth, who understood her children's worth, and who could stand unshaken in the face of disbelief. I had become someone who could inspire respect, not demand it. The final gathering, where I saw their eyes soften and their attitudes shift, had been a quiet victory. No dramatic confrontations were needed. The truth of our lives, lived authentically and boldly, had spoken louder than any argument ever could. I realized, finally, that celebration didn't require permission. It required courage, dedication, and love. And as my children ran ahead into the evening light, laughing and free, I whispered softly to myself, a serene smile on my lips. We are worth celebrating, every single day. I am Madison Carter, and this is our story.